There's three big red flags or missteps that I see people make often when investing in short-term rentals. And unfortunately, once you've purchased the wrong property, it's very difficult to ever recover from that. They say you make your money in real estate when you purchase a property, and that's because if you buy the right property up front with solid fundamentals, then it's actually surprisingly pretty forgiving to mistakes along the way. Because of those solid fundamentals, you can make mistakes and still make money because it's just kind of stacked in your favor. On the flip side, if you've fallen victim to any of these three big red flags that I'm going to go over today and you've purchased the wrong property, then you can operate that thing perfectly and it might never make you any money because it was just the wrong property to start with. So in this video, I'm going to go over those three big red flags or missteps that people make and then a solution as to how you can avoid these and purchase the perfect property that's going to get you to your goals the absolute fastest. So diving right into big red flag number one, and that is not understanding who your ideal guest is for that specific property before purchasing the property. So one of the hardest obstacles for me to help people get past when I work with them on buying a high cash flowing short-term rental is to wipe away their perception of what a good short-term rental is or what it needs to be in order to be successful. So last year alone, there were right around 500 million bookings on Airbnb. So just on Airbnb, that doesn't include Vrbo, doesn't include direct bookings or all the other platforms, 500 million bookings. Now I can tell you that a lot of those bookings, hundreds of millions of those bookings were not necessarily bookings on properties that you might imagine as the most successful short-term rentals. Like for most people, if I have you close your eyes and you picture what an Airbnb or what a short-term rental or what a vacation rental needs to be or what it should, the ideal one, look like, you're probably going to picture the type of house that your family would want a vacation to. You know, maybe it's a big single family house in a mainstream vacation rental market. Maybe it has a pool, and there's nothing wrong with these properties. These properties can do really well, but it's important to recognize that that's a small subset of these 500 million bookings that took place last year, and that every market is very different, and every market's going to have a very different ideal guest that your listing needs to speak to. So what most people do is they bring their own biases into the equation, and they think that everyone else is just like them, and they're looking to book properties that they would want to stay at. And so they set up their properties based on intuition, and they forget about the fact that they need to speak to the ideal guest for that specific market. And in a lot of cases, the highest end properties aren't necessarily the ones that are performing the highest from a financial standpoint. In a lot of cases, it's more the affordable properties, and a lot of these affordable properties speak to guests who are traveling for different reasons than a high-end vacation. There's a lot of people who travel for work. There's a lot of people who travel to see family or go to funerals or weddings or all these different reasons. And so by going through a data analysis process up front and analyzing all the comparable Airbnbs in the area and really zeroing in on what are the ones that perform the best, who is staying there, read through every single review of the highest performing Airbnbs in that specific market, and you can start to get a really good understanding of who that ideal guest is. You'll start to see trends across those, what type of amenities they like, what type of location within that market do they want to be close to, what attractions are they there to do, or what's the reason that they're traveling. It's so important to speak to that one ideal guest for that specific market. And you're going to get bookings for a lot of different reasons, but if your listing can speak to that one ideal person, that's going to elevate your listing to the top of search. And the only way to get there is to really understand who your ideal guest is and then purchase the property based on that specific person. Big red flag or misstep number two that I see people make all the time when investing in short-term rentals is not understanding prior to the purchase what is required for your particular property you're about to purchase to perform well. So I want to share with you a couple examples here. I'm going to switch my screen over. And these are examples of a couple different markets and what's required to perform really well in these different markets. Because what a lot of people do is they clump all short-term rentals together and they say things like, this is what your short-term rental needs to perform well, or you have to have this amenity, or it has to be this type of property. And again, there were 500 million bookings on Airbnb last year, and there's a wide variety of the types of properties that are going to perform well in different markets. So what I did is I just searched a few markets just to show you the stark contrast of the top performing properties in different markets and to show you what it is, what type of amenities and what type of properties perform the best in these different markets. So the first one is a really affordable market. It was actually ranked as one of the top markets by AirDNA for 2025. And that's because it, from a cost standpoint, it's really affordable or low cost, but yet there's still a lot of demands or a lot of drivers, local attractions for the area that drive up that nightly rate and occupancy compared to a really affordable purchase price. That's the type of market where the ROI is typically the highest, where the cash flow is the highest. This market that I picked for this example is Akron, Ohio. When you put in a market, and I just put in the market, didn't pick specific days or anything, what happens is Airbnb zooms out. Now there's probably 1,000 short-term rentals in the Akron area, but it zooms the map out and it wants to show you the top 10 to 20 short-term rentals, like the guest favorites first. If you look at the map here, it looks like there's only 10 or 20 short-term rentals in Akron, but as you zoom into different areas, it'll show you for that specific area, all the different short-term rentals in that area. But what it does, if you just search a market in general, these are the top performing or the top recommended short-term rentals by Airbnb in this market. So as you scroll through, you can see these are typical houses. They're not anything over the top, high-end vacation rentals that a lot of people think you need to have if you're operating an Airbnb. Let's look at some of these, like this one here. It's got all 5-star reviews, 34 reviews, but it's pretty basic and not even, I don't think, professional pictures. I think these are just iPhone pictures and it's not super updated, but it's decent, and people like it. It's an adequate place to stay. And that's one of the top performers in Akron. This is another one. It's decent. It's okay. Nothing over the top for sure. I mean, some outdated furnishings and stuff. And again, not professional pictures. This is tile from maybe the 1980s, 1970s. But yet it's still performing just fine, and it's ranked, or it's rated right at the top as the second property, and it's a guest favorite. This is at Akron. Now you compare this is the competition that you're dealing with. This is what's performing well in these markets, and you compare that to a market like Scottsdale. So Scottsdale is more of a mainstream short-term rental market. There's tons of short-term rentals there. Typically the price point is, I would say, probably 4 to 5 times as much for the same property in Scottsdale as Akron. Maybe it's even more than that. But when you put in Scottsdale, some of the top properties that pop up look substantially different. They typically have all the amenities. They're very high-end, very updated. A lot of them have a nice pool in the backyard. Very, I would say, fancy type of short-term rentals. And so that's the competition there. So a lot of people aren't understanding that it's not apples to apples to compare the type of property that you need to buy in these different markets. Here's another one, Sevierville, Tennessee. And so if you put that in, a lot of the top ones that pop up are going to be these higher-end cabins that have all the amenities and have a view. And so it's like this arms race in these more mainstream short-term rental markets where there's so much competition. Everybody's just trying to one up everyone else with the newest amenity or the newest property, the highest end amenity, and the highest end properties. So based on this, you can see the different markets perform very differently. And it's so important to understand for your particular market, what is required or what performs the absolute best. If you don't offer the things that guests want for that specific market, then you're probably not going to get booked. So if you're picking a place like Sevierville or like Scottsdale, then you're probably going to have all of the top amenities just to compete with most of the top performing properties in that market. However, on the flip side, if you just assume that every market's like Scottsdale and every market's like Sevierville, then if you buy in a market like Akron, you might go way overboard. And you might say, well, I have to have a hot tub and I have to have all these different amenities. And those things are just cost centers for you because all these amenities require upkeep and they require you to continue to maintain these different amenities. And you might not even need those amenities to start with. Your ideal guest might not even want those amenities. It actually hurts your performance by having some of these amenities. So it's super important to understand what's required for your particular property to perform well in that specific market. And the final big red flag that I see a lot of people run into when they're in the process of investing in a short-term rental is that they don't have clarity on the specific outcome that they're after for getting into short-term rentals. So a lot of people will email me a deal and say, hey, is this a good deal? And I'll say, I have no clue if it's a good deal because I don't know what the outcome is specifically that you're after, right? It's like the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland. When Allison is lost and she asks him, which way should I go? And he says, well, where do you want to get to? And she's like, well, I don't know where I want to get to. And he's like, well, it doesn't matter which way you go then. You can go anyway. And it's the exact same with short-term rentals. So many people get into this and they're not clear on why. And it could be very different. And some of the reasons why might complement each other, and some reasons might totally contradict each other. Like, for example, you might want to own a short-term rental because you just want a place that you can vacation with your family and you want it to be essentially free because you rent it out the rest of the time and it kind of pays for itself. That's a very different outcome than it for someone who wants to escape the rat race of the 9 to 5 and maximize cash flow as much as humanly possible and own as few deals as possible with the highest cash flow amount. Those two are very different outcomes to get to, and they're going to require very different actions. So most of us who own short-term rentals, we don't own short-term rentals just to own short-term rentals. There's a reason why you're getting into this. And a lot of people that I work with, they want the highest cash flow possible. But if you don't clarify that up front, then you're going to probably act on intuition. Again, you're going to go back to, what does a good short-term rental feel like to me? Like, what's a top performing short-term rental feel like based on my intuition? And a lot of times that's going to lead you in the wrong direction. It's going to lead you to a property that, in a lot of cases, it's a beautiful property. It's a property that you are proud to post on Instagram. You want to share it with all your friends and tell them all, look at this beautiful property I own. But then you realize after the fact, it doesn't actually cash flow and it's not actually getting you to your goal of financial freedom. A lot of times the properties that perform the best, I'm talking thousands and thousands of dollars per month of net cash flow. And I've gone through tons of videos on this channel, tons of examples of these types of properties. A lot of times they're not the sexiest properties. They're great properties. They're great places for people to stay. They get great reviews, but they don't have the highest end amenities. They're not in the most mainstream markets. And so if you aren't super clear on the outcome that you want right up front, then you're probably going to end up kind of going astray in terms of picking the right type of property. And it's not going to get you to the goal that got you into short-term rentals to start with. So when my wife and I were just getting started with this strategy, what really helped us was to set aside short-term rentals and just focus on, if we were living our ideal life, what would that look like? What would our days look like? How would we spend our time? Who do we want to spend it with? If we're living our perfect days, what would that look like? And we realized that it didn't include a 9 to 5 job. There was a lot of things we wanted to do that a 9 to 5 job would preclude us from being able to do. And so then we had to look at what type of investment was going to get us there the quickest. And that's how we landed on this strategy of really high cash flowing short-term rentals. But we realized early on, we couldn't just buy the traditional short-term rentals that you hear everybody online talking about in these mainstream markets. We had to really focus in on which properties are going to deliver the highest cash flow possible. And so 4 years ago, it got us to a place of being able to leave our full-time jobs. So for the last 4 years, we haven't had to work full-time jobs because of the cash flow from our short-term rentals. And over time, we got better and better at identifying who the ideal guest is, what the type of property is in these specific markets that's going to perform the highest, that's going to create the highest cash flow. And by doing that, it got us to our outcome that we were very specific about up front. So hopefully this helped clarify some things for you as you're picking the best short-term rental for you based on whatever it is that your outcome and your goals are. And I work with people personally to walk them through this entire process, very step by step. How to identify the right market, how to pick the right property, how to run the numbers, what type of financing to use, all the checklists and tools that you need. So if you're interested in working with me personally through that entire process and kind of shortcutting the process from where you are now to having a really high cash flowing short-term rental, you can set up a call with me at livingoffrentals.com/call, and that'll take you to a short questionnaire. And then once you fill out those questions, it'll take you right to my calendar. You can set up a call with me and we can talk through your specific goals and the details of the program and see if it's a good fit for you. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me for this video. I don't take that lightly. I appreciate it. God bless, and I'll see you in the next video.